Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, I really appreciate that. That helps to get my channel promoted. I also love it when you leave comments, so feel free to, if you have a question or a suggestion for a video, or just like to talk about how you do things. I like those things, so let me know what you think. It's been a little bit since I did a big cuff bracelet, so I think I'm going to do one today. But I'm going to do something really kind of streamlined and sleek, and that's probably what it's going to end up being called, is sleek modern cuff bracelet or something like that. I am going to be using a pretty piece of jasper that my friend John cut, and I wanted to call him out for that. He's a great lapidary, and I'll put a link to his stuff in the video description if you're interested. I also have an interview of him on my Patreon about his artwork. If you're interested in that, you can sign up for Patreon, but here's a little clip from it. Yeah, I have the honor of interviewing one of my friends, and his name is John Stromberger, and he is an excellent lapidary and silversmith.
Appreciate the invite to talk a little bit about what I do. Started with the stones and moved into the silver work. Luckily, I got to take some classes with you and learned a ton.
Now that you've done both, which aspect of it do you prefer? What's your favorite part?
Well, that's a loaded question. The rock side of it is where my passion is more. To go out into the middle of nowhere, Montana, or nowhere, Wyoming, and collect stones is just, there's nothing like it. And to find a stone and cut it open and see what's in there it's you never know. It's like a present. It's like Christmas every time. Wow,
what your least favorite materials are?
Like the things that smell bad. Like Mary Ellen Jasper is beautiful. I love that stone. But boy, it's like somebody got murdered in the water tubs. It's red, nasty stuff.
I know you are successful. You're one of the people that I know who is successful on Etsy. I know a lot of people who aren't successful on Etsy, and I'm curious as to how you made that happen.
Good photography, not just 10 pictures, but 10 good pictures. Your descriptions, do a lot of research in trying to figure out the Etsy algorithms. I work on it every day. There's something that I'll do every day, and I think they notice. I think they notice if you're doing something every day.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I respect you as a metalsmith and a lapidary. And I think it's time for you to take me out and take me rock hounding again, because I spend all my time in my basement making videos and I need to get out of the house.
Nice to know there's a place where people can ask questions and get positive.
Yeah, everybody's been super nice. So speaking of Patreon, I have a new patron, Melanie O. I wanted to thank you for signing up. I really appreciate it. And I wanted to thank all my other patrons too for making it such a nice place over there. I really appreciate not only the financial contribution, but also the environment that you've made over there. It's nice to see you all communicating with each other and sharing ideas and stuff. It's a nice community now, so thanks for that. The other group I wanted to thank is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 13,000 subscribers, which is awesome. Thank you so much for that. I love when you guys leave comments, and some of the comments are very moving, and I really appreciate that kind of input. I want you to know that I also appreciate you, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. So I'm glad that you're getting things out of them from what you've told me, and that's my purpose here. So thank you also for the financial contributions, like the Buy Me a Coffee and the Super Thanks. That helps with the cost of materials, as they're getting a little pricey right now. So. All right, well, let's get started on this kind of modern bracelet. So this is one of my design idea books. I just broke this one out because I just filled up my previous one. There's a project from a couple of days ago, and this is the one that we're going to be doing today. I found recently, actually since I started doing the YouTube channel, if I sketch things up in advance, I end up getting a nicer result. So I usually do that, and so this is what we're going to be doing today. Like I said, my friend John cut me some pretty stones, and I don't know if the camera can capture this, but it has this red fibrous nature to it, and this is called Mary Ellen jasper, and apparently it's from Minnesota. But it's got this deep, rich, kind of fibrous looking texture internally, and it's just beautiful. So I was going to put that into a bracelet as the centerpiece, and I thought it's got nice clean oval shape, and I thought let's make something clean with clean lines. And I do like geometric and symmetrical stuff, so I try to push myself out of that sometimes just to do different things, but by nature I like symmetrical stuff, I think. So what I'm going to do, this is going to be a cuff bracelet, so it's going to be about, I think I measured about 5 3/4 inches, which is roughly 150 millimeters, I believe, or 15 centimeters. And I was originally going to do flat ends and just 2 pieces of thick, wide half-round wire. I have this this low dome half round. Low dome means it's not a full half circle. It's kind of a flattened half circle, and they do that because if you had it, if you wanted wide domed wire like this, if you made it a full half circle, it would be really tall and hard to bend too, probably. So I like this stuff a lot, and I use it quite a bit in my videos. But I'm going to be doing a piece here, a piece here, and next to that I'll be soldering, I have this 8-gauge half round here. I haven't cut a piece off yet, so that's going to be soldered to the inside of that piece of low dome, and this one's going to have one on the inside here, and then I'll do one straight down the middle, so there's going to be 2 gaps in the middle here. It's going to give the bracelet a really wide profile, and I like that, and I think it'll kind of frame the stone. I did these ends here to kind of match the curve of the stone a little bit to give it some symmetry. And I think overall it's going to be kind of a sleek, modern-looking bracelet. It's going to have a high polish and everything, so I think it'll be nice. One of the things I'm going to do, I'm not going to mount this bezel on top of the band. I'm going to actually inset it into the band. And if you've ever tried to solder anything to the side of a bezel, like a bracelet, and then go to bend it, you're going to know that the bezel is pretty flimsy compared to most of the material you're using. And so when you go to bend it like that, it's going to flex your bezel outwards like this. So I'm going to show you a little trick to preventing that, or making it a lot less likely to happen. Because I'm still going to use relatively thin sheet for the bottom. I think I'm going to use 22 gauge this time, which equates to 0.66 millimeters. So, oh, and these gauges here, for those of you who use the metric system, the low dome half round number 5 is, or number 4 is 5.89 millimeters wide. That's this outer stuff. This inner stuff, this 8-gauge half round, is 3.25 millimeters wide. And then this is going to be 10-gauge square, and that's 2.59 millimeters wide. So the bezel I'm going to use, I forgot to write that down, it's 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, which is 4.76 millimeters if I remember. And I'm going to use the 26 gauge, which is a little bit thicker than, sometimes I use 28, but 26 is more appropriate for this one, I think. So we'll use that. That's what this stuff is. And like I said on the bottom, oh, these things here are going to be 14 gauge, and those are going to be our little extra supporters. So, but first let's make a bezel. There's so many fun jaspers from various places around the world. They also, a lot of stones that are marketed are called jasper but aren't actually jasper. I'm not sure about this one. I'll have to ask John about it. But for instance, bumblebee jasper is not jasper. Jasper is a form of cryptocrystalline quartz, and sometimes it becomes a catch-all name for a lot of new minerals. when they don't know what else to call them. But bumblebee jasper, for instance, is actually a volcanic stone. I think it has sulfur in it. Sometimes there's a little arsenic, I believe, and maybe manganese dioxide or something like that. But it ended up being called bumblebee jasper. I wanted to thank all of the people who've downloaded my ebook already. I really appreciate that. It seems to be pretty popular. If you're interested, it's a guide to the 2023 videos I did, which is at 3 videos per week. That's quite a few videos. It has a sketch like this that I drew before I did the video. It has the final version of the thing that I made, or things if it's a multi-project video. And has a list of materials and difficulty rating, my subjective difficulty rating. And then some notes I made about each project, like, you know, if I was to do it again, would I do it the same way, or would I change things, and stuff like that. So, and finally, it has a link right to the video if you want to watch it. So, if you're interested in that, I'll put a link up there for you. The solder that I generally use is hard silver sheet solder. And this is a liquid flux. It's a self-pickling flux. And the torch is a Silversmith model, which is their Soldering era version. One thing probably to note about this project is that it's going to involve quite a bit of metal, and in order to get that metal up to the soldering temperature, you're probably going to need a pretty hot torch. And so if you're using one of those little butane portables, it may not have the ability to get your piece hot enough to really solder well. If you try it, let me know how it works, because I've not found that those were hot enough to do great big pieces. It's usually just limited by size. So, and this is going to be a big heavy bracelet, I think, with all that metal. So if you try it with a smaller torch, you may run into problems. So this one's going to be kind of a modernish one. I do a lot of different styles. What kind of styles would you like to see? I occasionally do some filigree-ish kind of things, or, you know, harkens back to a different art period, sort of. Done a few fun things like that. What would you like to see? I'm interested. Do you like modern? Do you like ornate? Do you like geometric? I did kind of a cubist pendant a little while back. That was sort of fun. Tell me in the comments what you like. We did pretty well on the size. So like I said, normally I use 26 for it, but I'm going to use slightly thicker stuff since it's going to be a big bracelet. And I'm also going to do some reinforcement because of the way we're going to mount the band of this on the sides of it. So I'm going to use quite a bit of solder on this to make sure I get a good solid seam all the way around. Just going to push these up against the sides. They don't have to lean, they just have to touch. With a little bit bigger bezel like this, if you're new to this. On little ones you can just kind of go around the outside most of the time. But this one's got enough surface area in the middle to where that'll act as a kind of cooling surface. So you gotta visit that inside now and again. I always try to, especially when you're using a little bit thicker bottom, you're going to want to kind of almost avoid the bezel when you're heating the sheet underneath it. Just because the bezel is kind of exposed up top here. It's easy to melt the bezel before you ever get that sheet up to the 1450 degrees you need to melt that hard silver sheets out of there. And they both need to reach that temperature for it to stick to it. So once it does start to flow, I'm kind of watching for a nice liquid seam that goes all the way around there. Make sure we get a nice clean seam all there, because it should just wick all the way along the length of that. I'm just going to trim off the excess sheet here, and we'll file it flush. Make sure not to angle underneath here. Oops. I still need to find a good ricochet sound to put in here whenever I clip a piece of metal off and it goes flying somewhere. Like a cartoonish one. Okay, so now we're just going to file this flush. When you're doing this stage, you want to make sure not to file the top of the bezel. It's okay if you file it until it blends into the bottom there. In fact, that's what I'd like. But if you start to hit the top of the bezel up there, it's going to get really thin and fragile. Because bezel's already pretty thin anyway. If you need to brace this against something to do this, that's fine. Okay. So I'm going to set that to the side for a minute. And I need to cut some pieces of this stuff, so I'm going to cut 2 of these. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut them to be from the longest end to the longest end here, and then I'll just trim them off after I make these pieces. I think that seems to be the most logical way to do it. So I'm just going to cut them to be about slightly shy of 150. So 149. I think we can use this first one as a guide to cut the second one. Get them pretty close to the same length. Well, since these are going to be on the outside, it doesn't have to be perfect, but start from a place where everything's even, then we'll end up with a better result probably. This one's a little bit longer, so I can file them down to be exactly the same. I may use my miter vise jig to get them all perfectly straight. Those are handy if you don't have one of those. I'll show it to you in a minute. Now, for this 8 gauge half round, I need to cut 3 pieces the same length. Okay, so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just doing a little bit of straightening and flattening. I want them to lay flat on the table and be as straight as possible. Then we'll worry about the ends. So I have a lot of luck with using my flat nose pliers. You could also use some nylon jawed pliers if you're worried about marking the metal up. I find if I just use these to hold the wire, and then use my fingers to kind of make the bends, it just acts as a leverage point then. It's not so much going to ding up the metal. Well, it's pretty close. Probably close enough. Okay, so let me show you this miter vise jig. They allow you to slide something through this little gap here and line it up and then file along the edge so you get a nice straight 90-degree angle. You can also do 45s. If you look at it from the side, you can slide them down like that. They even make a model that has 60s and 30s. I should have saved up and gotten one of those, but I didn't. So I'm going to line these up and file these all flat on the ends. And then I'm going to make sure they're all the same length and do it on the opposite end, but I'm not going to probably make you watch me do all of it. So I just kind of parked it in that kind of nook there. So you get a nice clean 90-degree angle there. So, like I said, I'm going to do all of those, and I'll get everything lined up, and I'll be right back. I have these all straightened up and filed neatly, and so I'm going to cut some big chunks of solder. I think I have them straight enough to where once I get the solder flowing and this temperature up to the right temperature, it should just kind of wick along that seam. See how that goes. Actually, we went down to the end, but I'm going to add just a little bit more. This is called pick soldering, where you pick it up with your pick, and then you heat the piece up to the temperature you want it to be. That's hot enough for the solder to flow. And I can tell with this because there's already some solder in it, and that starts to liquefy around there. So I'm just going to add enough to make sure we have enough seam all the way down there. Okay, so these cleaned up a little bit in the pickle, and I decided I was going to use my little square thing here so I could get these to be lined up nicely, and I need the small side inwards like this. So I'll line them up on the outside edge there. And I cut these in advance so that I could use them as a template in order to cut these off at the right length. So what I'm going to do I'm not going to worry about the middle one. I can just solder that one right to the middle. But I think, so I'm going to use the saw to cut that off, I think. So let's go do that real quick. Somebody asked me to remember to say what kind of, what size of blade I'm using, and I think this is a number 1, maybe. It's a pretty good sized one. Okay, we'll go back and clean those up with the file, and then maybe we can solder them. When you have something as disparate in mass as these things are, there's quite a bit of mass here, not so much here. Most of the heat's going to need to go into this. First, I'm going to pick up a little solder, or a big chunk of solder. If you're kind of new to this, you may be wondering why I'm heating over here when I'm just trying to solder right there. And that's because with silver you have to generally heat the entire piece up to the soldering temperature for it to solder well. If I just get this piece up to soldering temperature, which is pretty easy because it's way less massive than these pieces, which are all part of a single piece now, it'll form what's called a cold solder joint, where it looks like it flows, but it doesn't really stick to this bigger mass. And it'll just break off pretty easily. So that is an undesirable thing to have happen. So let this cool for a second, and then we'll start getting the other side lined up. So I've gotten everything kind of cleaned up with the file and lined up how I'd like. So we just need to solder that side on. One of the things I was really trying to do is make sure that everything was pretty parallel. So, pretty easy to see when something's just a little bit crooked. Okay, so now I need to find the exact center of this and trace out where I'm going to cut out the parts so I can solder that in. So let's see if we can't find the exact center. That should be pretty close. Okay, I'm going to saw that out and then we'll see if we can't fit that in there. Be right back. For this last bit here, I'm going to solder these in first, and then I'm going to bend these down to where they're tightly against that, and then we'll solder that in. And then we're going to pickle it, and then I'll show you how to shape it after we set the stone at the end. So let's do that. Let's cut some more solder. At this point we have quite a bit of mass here, and there's not much mass in this piece compared to the rest of this. So we're going to have to really get that hot everywhere, and not as hot as the bezel is so we don't melt that. So we need to solder those then. And one other thing I'm going to do is, I think these ones are probably okay, but in order to prevent our bezel in the middle from doing this, I'm going to run a piece of wire right across the bottom there between those two. So probably use some 14 gauge. So I want it to run from side to side and actually be soldered to either side of the bezel. That'll kind of reinforce that across there, and then we can fill in the gaps between it with tag board when we're setting this. So let's cut that to be just exactly the right length. I want it to be touching the sides tightly and on the bottom, and I'm going to solder it along the whole length and onto the sides as well as these outside pieces. So let's make sure I have plenty of solder. Yeah, I was just doing a little, you know, doing some kind of repairs on the back that didn't quite solder the way I'd like. So get this out of there. And I'm going to let that cool, and then I'm going to let it pickle. And then when we come back, I'll set the stone and we'll shape it. So I think that's going to be pretty and heavy. So I have this all polished up and getting ready to set this stone. I got it about the level I want it to be. And then I'm going to use, I do this a little differently than some. I'm going to use the chain nose pliers here, this flat side, for the initial pushing of the bezel like this. Tightening it up against the stone. I did put some tag board in the little cavities between the little brace, and then a thin layer right above that. Do a little burnishing. Kind of get this shaped a little bit. I'll do a little bit of hand shaping like this. I'm going to try not to put too much pressure up here. Then, as we get to a certain level, do that. But that's basically what I was shooting for. Of course, with cuff bracelets, you can adjust them to meet the needs of the individual wrist. But that's, well, that's really kind of what I was hoping for. Hopefully you can see this pretty stone in the pictures, but there we go. I'll get that shined up and clean up the top of the bezel where I just burnished it with a rubber polishing wheel, rubber silicone polishing wheel, and I'll take some better pictures. So, all right, well, that was the sleek modern bracelet with a Mary Ellen jasper, and thanks for that cool stone, John. Also, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button if you enjoyed the content, I appreciate that as well. And take a moment and check out some of my other videos. I have over 350 of them now, and I think there's probably something else you'll find interesting there too. So I try to change it up pretty frequently, and with 3 videos a week, that starts to produce quite a bit of content. So check it out, and then maybe consider subscribing. I'd love to have you as a follower. So. The other thing is, don't forget to check out the video description. There's some important links down there. There's one to my friend John's site, like I said earlier in the video. There's a link to my merch store, which has both that ebook and those design idea books I talked about at the beginning. So if you're interested in downloading that book or getting one of those nice design idea notebooks, that's where you would go. There's also going to be a link to my Patreon, as well as the Buy Me a Coffee link and some other links like that. So check those out and come back to visit again. Thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing.